All right, guys, 9 a.m. straight up on the West Coast, noontime East Coast. How's everybody doing? Hope everybody is safe from the recent storms that passed through there. Derek, not sure. I heard it was kind of minimal around the Snap area, but who knows?
It did nothing to Charlotte, but if you had a beach house like my sister-in-law did, it may have
Really
taken a little damage.
Amazing. All right, guys, welcome to the weekly Wednesday webinar series, and that's hosted by me, Gary Usher, for the Snap AV Locals. So I welcome all of our dealers. Together with Volutone, Custom Plus, MRI, and AllNet, we do this a couple times a week, and the attendance has been great. I love the curriculums that we put together with all the vendors that we carry collectively. But most important is Derek and I have been training for forever, for the last few years, and he's been so instrumental in us adopting, many of the Snap, components and categories. But even when we do, very familiar territory for Derek, we still want to frame this properly for the Snap AV Locals, and that's why we do this. So this is an hour class. Derek, when we were touring around, especially in the early days with Snap, and you were kind of presenting all of the categories, MoIP and binary was always something that we had to, or we didn't carve enough space out, it seemed. Everybody was curious about it. So, we were never able to do a completely dedicated binary MoIP thing. So I'm really glad to present this one today. I'm looking forward to the course. Ladies and gentlemen, remember, I'm recording this right now. I'm gonna have Derek's slide deck, and I'm gonna send everybody who registered an email tonight with all the data, all of this coming back at you, so you could share it with your team, pass it along, watch it again. It'll be in our Volutone Snap AV Locals archive section. All the videos are posted there. So with that being said, we'll take care of you. You'll have our contact information. So you hear something you like here, and let us help you out with the jobs coming forward and getting introduced, if you will, if you are, to binary and MoIP. Certainly excited. All right, my friend, the myth, the legend, seriously. Derek, how are you? It's great to work with you. You always got the cool shirts on too. Every time, man, it's like whatever we present, he's got the shirt. I'm gonna put a link to some kind of shirt portal so we can get these guys hooked up.
I think that'd be great.
All right, guys.
Great.
All of us from AllNet, MRI, Custom Plus, and Volutone, we thank you guys so much. We'll talk to you soon. Derek, it's all yours, bud. Thank you.
Thanks, Gary. I always appreciate the intro. Welcome, everybody. So real quick, before we get rolling into the content today, just want to quickly, for some of you guys that may be new, if you're having any audio problems within your presentation today, with any problems hearing me in the bottom left-hand corner there of the Zoom window, you'll be able to test your audio and whatnot. But really the most important thing above all is when you guys have questions, and I expect questions to come through, please use that Q&A option that you see there. That's going to be the best way to communicate with me. It's going to be the best way for us to chat and interact throughout the day. I really expect to see some questions rolling in there. They don't have to be 100% relevant. You want to give me some kudos, go ahead and put that in there as well. You want to give Gary some kudos, put it in there too.
Hey,
either way, let's get the questions rolling, because that's how we're really going to drive this home for you guys as we kind of go through things. So for those that don't know me, my name is Derek Webb. I am one of the technical instructors here at Snap AV. I've been with Snap AV now for, it'll be 8 years at the end of this month. So when I first started, there was just over 100 people working at Snap AV in our little office in Charlotte, North Carolina. We have obviously grown exponentially. And so really the last 2 years I've spent traveling to our local locations and doing trainings very similar to this one. So obviously we're not doing that right now, so we're supplementing the best way we can. And so we're excited for all you guys to be here and kind of go through this content. So one thing that Gary was mentioning already is options for other training that you see around with Snap AVM, with Control4, et cetera, right? So a lot of you guys, if you haven't used it before, at snapav.com/training, we have a large area full of training videos, webinars, and support documents. Basically all the webinars that we do, we like to post there. We have targeted support documents that are very specific to what we're going to talk about today with MoIP, on how to set up a networking portion, how to do it with other manufacturer switches, whatever it may be. Tons of great content there. And we have our Snap University, which is our online training portal where you guys can take self-paced learning. and we have a dedicated course just to MoIP. So if you want to use this as a great way to learn this webinar, it's perfect. And if you want to take something a little bit slower paced, you can go and take our Snap University course at your own time and learn a little bit more as well. So I encourage you guys, use the resources we have. We want to make your lives easier, and we do our best to give you guys that in many different forms. We're going to keep doing these types of trainings, but we're also going to keep making content for you guys elsewhere so that when you're in the field and you need help, you don't have to wait in line for tech support. You can go online and get access to those tools right there at your fingertips. So that's my spiel. That's my intro to what I do, what my team does. Let's jump into kind of what we're talking about today. And so, as Gary was already mentioning it, right, MoIP as a platform has been a really exciting product for Snap AV since we launched it and for Binary. You know, literally, geez, it was 2.5 years ago now when we first came out, or 2 years ago when we first came out with this platform. And it's been really fun. It's been something that's been very new and innovative for the industry. For us, the actual idea of video over IP has been around for quite a while. We have plenty of competitors that have been doing similar types of solutions. And MoIP is similar to what they're doing, but it's very different in how they implement it. And that's what we really want to talk about. But to really break that down and take a few steps back, when you talk about media distribution, Snap AV, we kind of, about 3-4 years ago, we kind of got out of the media distribution game. It's actually been about 5 years ago now. And we kind of took a step back. We saw it starting to, in a sense, die out in the idea of video distribution across the home, mainly because the streaming media world was starting to grow exponentially. Well, we saw an opportunity as streaming media started to grow in size and the amount of those devices across your home. It wasn't feasible for you to have 30 Roku devices behind every single TV in your house, right? It's just not going to work. You guys know that. And so this idea of media distribution started to kind of come back to the forefront of the industry. But what was lacking was innovation. The traditional HDBHT matrix is great for some smaller jobs, but it really doesn't work for some of your 8 to 10 TV jobs and bigger. And the flexibility that's required on those jobs also wasn't there. It's really hard for you guys to sell a 16 by 16 HDMI matrix as your future proofing product, right? Because what happens when you go to that job site and you sold them an 8 by 8 matrix and that client wants to add a 9th TV? How do you fix that? Now, if I could hear everybody in a training room, somebody would be funny and laugh and say, give them a splitter. You're not going to do that. You're never going to do that. If you do that, you're no longer going to be able to buy a matrix switch from us because you guys know you can't use splitters on matrix switchers. You're going to have to sell them a bigger matrix to go from an 8 by 8 to, say, an 8 by 16 HDBHT matrix. You guys that are the ones out there doing the buying, that ain't cheap. That costs a lot of money, and it's not feasible, and it's a bad customer experience. The idea of video distribution over IP, MoIP, as the example we're going to talk about today, is creating flexible and scalable systems. You design the job for exactly what you need. However many inputs you need, however many sources you have, however many TVs you have, however many outputs, that's what you buy. You buy exactly for what the job needs. You don't have to buy this extra matrix in size just because the job might need it down the road. That's the ultimate idea of this, is creating these flexible, scalable systems for you guys to get in the door. When we were developing this platform, we kind of set out to solve 3 specific problems or areas of opportunity we saw, which was these things. Historically, this whole market's been very tough to sell and design for. The reason it's been tough to sell and design is because there's way too many products out there to choose from. A lot of our competitors have too many options. You buy this transmitter and it gives you this subset of features for control. Oh, but you're missing audio control there. You buy this one, it gives you 1080p at a lower price, but you lose all this other stuff over here for audio. There's too many options. Our goal was to make this much easier for you guys to sell and design for. You don't need a high-end design service to make this thing work. You guys can all do it on your own, and that's the first thing we tried to solve. And we're going to go through that more today. The second is these things have to be easy to install. This should not take you hours upon hours to do an install. This should not require some type of third-party service to set up the system for you. You should be able to get this thing on the job site as quickly as possible, set it up, and be gone. The most time-intensive piece of the setup is going to be running your wire if it's a new job and setting up your control system. But if you're really good at control system programming, that should be easy. The last piece is these solutions should be extremely easy to manage. HDMI is always going to be a challenge. Doesn't matter. It's just the fact of HDMI is that we don't own it. Hollywood owns HDMI. All of the content, the copyright protection, and things are getting crammed into that. That's always going to change. Every manufacturer from Sony to LG to Samsung to whoever has their own views on how it should be implemented. And we're left to pick up those pieces. Having a system living in the cloud, like we're going to talk about today with the OvrC, that is HDMI, is a big deal. Not only does that make it easier for you guys to troubleshoot stuff on the fly, it allows for us to push updates for you over the cloud that don't require a truck roll to add new features, to fix potential bugs that are out there in the field that may pop up from other manufacturers' firmware updates. Those are the things we're trying to solve with this. And then we've also obviously added some new features with some new hardware that we're going to talk about today as well. So the goals today, I'm going to give you guys an overview of what MoIP is today, what the hardware looks like, and then we're going to go through the actual setup, talk about some of the features that are out there, show you guys what it looks like, talk about how you can actually implement some of these things. So 2 pieces, overview, setup. Like I said, as we're going through these things, feel free to ask your questions. If there's something I missed, because there's definitely a lot here to talk about, feel free to ask for clarification as well. I'm happy to dive a little bit deeper in some certain areas as we kind of talk through it. So when we talk about the components that make up a MoIP system, this is very important as we want to really kind of hammer home the ease of install, the ease of selling and designing these things. We have very few components to choose from, but we have all the features you need in all of those components, which is very, very important. Obviously, the first piece of every single job for MoIP is your network switch. The backbone of your system is a layer 2 managed PoE switch. Our Arachnus 210 series and 310 series switches are fully compatible with MoIP. Either of them, I run my entire system on a 210 series. You can use 310, whatever you feel comfortable with. We design a system on those first and foremost. Third-party switches are supported. Not every switch is created equal, so I encourage you guys to be careful when you're buying a switch. Do not skimp on price just because you don't want to buy ours or you don't want to buy something that's a little more expensive. Not all switches are created equal. Just understand that. So obviously we recommend Arachnus and Pack Edge first and foremost. We do all of our testing on that. But your layer 2 managed PoE switch is the first piece that's required. Building on that, we do recommend that you use a dedicated switch for MoIP. What I mean by that is that we recommend that. Oh, so someone just told me you can't see my slides. As I'm going through all these slides here, no one told me yet. Thanks, Jacob. I appreciate it. Hey, look, you guys can see now. Hopefully you can. Sorry about that. I appreciate you guys letting me know. I always expect somebody to yell at me much earlier than that. That's my fault. So I'm going to show you guys my nice little intro transition because this is some fun animations here. Where we were talking about right here is the first component of your MoIP system is your network switch. What I was saying is we do recommend a dedicated switch for your MoIP deployments. What that means is that if you have your core network switch, right, your main switch over here, we recommend that you have your MoIP switch coming off that as your dedicated MoIP switch, and only MoIP devices connect to that. Does it have to be deployed that way? Not necessarily. But the reason we recommend that is it ensures that all the MoIP traffic just kind of stays away from the rest of your other network traffic. Because there are some extreme scenarios we've found where the MoIP traffic may interact poorly with other things out there. My system at home isn't deployed this way. It's deployed on my core switch with everything else. But I know how to tweak my network to account for those things. So we recommend a dedicated MoIP switch just because it makes your life a little bit easier when it comes to troubleshooting, but it's not 100% required. It's just a recommendation. It's a best practice, if you will. The next piece that we talk about with MoIP is our MoIP controller. The MoIP controller is the brains of the operation. It's what does all of your input and output switching, all of your EDID management, all of your control systems will communicate with this controller. It's the brains. You need one controller per job site. It just sits on the network. It's a little tiny black box, but it does everything. So you spec in one controller per job site. That's the easiest thing to think about there with the controller. This is what you log into to configure and manage the entire system. Then it really comes into the nuts and bolts of the system itself. We first have our transmitters. Some manufacturers call this their encoders, but this is your input. You need one transmitter per source. I will say that again, one transmitter per source. Our transmitters, this is an example of one of our transmitters. This is, I guess you could say, our legacy model, but this was the original model, still works for about 90% of your jobs. On your transmitter, obviously we support 4K HDR content at every single level with all of our transmitters. That's a big deal for video support. When you talk about MoIP, it's having that 4K content available. So essentially what we support is 4K 30, 422 with 10-bit HDR. Without HDR, we support 4K 30, 444, 8-bit. For some of you guys to kind of get the flow of that, we support 10-bit HDR at 422 or 8-bit color depth, non-HDR 444. At the end of the day, what I always talk about with video quality with these types of solutions, video over IP, not just MoIP, video over IP is compressed video. If I could ask some you guys to speak up in the room, does anyone know what true 4K content is data-wise? When I talk about true 4K, 4K 60, 444 color spacing at 12-bit color depth with HDR. True 4K is 24 gigabits per second. 24 gigabits per second. Your HDMI cables is all you guys think are going to be, the best. They're going to stand the test of time. You know what they support today? 18 gigs. Oops. Your HDMI cables aren't going to support true 4K unless you're deploying fiber. The point here is that we're taking at least 10 to 15 gigs of data and compressing it to fit on your network to give you a very, very flexible and scalable solution. So with that being said, compression does degrade the video signal slightly. What you put in, you don't fully get out. A lot of it you do, but you still miss some. If you put an HDMI connection up against a MoIP connection, there's going to be a difference in quality. But I'm not telling you guys to deploy MoIP with your $50,000 Sony projector. Deploy that with a dedicated fiber HDMI cable. This is distributed video, guys. It doesn't have to be the absolute best quality. It's the same way when you guys do distributed audio, right? You have your distributed audio speakers, your lower call speakers all across the home, but that dedicated listening room, you have your Martin Logans, whatever it may be, sitting in there that costs $70,000 a speaker. You have your $150,000 amplifier sitting there. You're not going to be running 16 gauge, simple speaker wire from the $70,000 Martin Logans to your $150,000 amplifier, are you? No, you're not going to do it. Same concept here. You have your dedicated spaces where you want your best quality. The idea of this is getting everything that you need at a competitive price and allowing you guys to be flexible and scalable across the board there. So that's our first transmit that we kind of been talking about there. Obviously, 4K HDR support. We have our PoE support. So these things, that's the best idea there. You don't need to use a power supply if you don't want to. We have PoE support on every single unit. We have an HDMI in and an HDMI loop out as well. The idea of that HDMI loop out is you can loop out HDMI and use that to run into, say, an audio video receiver to pull the audio from your sources. It's a great way to pull audio off on these guys. Obviously, HDCP 2.2 support on these guys. We have audio extraction on this model, the standard transmitter. That audio extraction only supports 2-channel PCM. Stand by, we'll talk about that more in a second. We have audio injection, so you can inject audio into the HDMI stream. And we also have bidirectional IR control on all of our transmitters, as well as virtual RS-232. I'll talk more about that here in a little bit as well. But all of our models, bidirectional IR and virtual RS-232. That's a big deal for control. So this model right here, this is our standard model. It has almost every feature you need for media distribution. It's an awesome piece here. And then recently last year, we released our new version of our transmitters. You know, we kind of call it the 2AC, but basically it's the exact same transmitter, and all we are adding to that is audio downmixing. So the standard model, you can still extract audio on that device, but it can only extract 2-channel PCM. If your source is sending a surround signal, the standard model can't work with that. It cannot extract that. If you want to be able to extract that off of the system, you need our new version, our version with audio downmixing. The only difference in terms of form factor, it's a little bit deeper because there is an actual decoder for audio on there. It has to have that decoder. That's why it costs a little bit more. But if you need to extract audio that's a surround signal and inject it into your multi-room audio solutions, that's the whole point of audio downmixing, is that you have a whole setup and you want to have that Roku, that cable box, that satellite box, you want to have the audio from that playing in every room in the house, but you're only watching the video in a couple of rooms. You need to have a system that can extract that and embed it into your distributed audio solution in the home. With the old model, you could have used an HDMI de-embedder to do that. But with our new model, the downmixing version of our transmitters, all you need is that piece, and it does all the downmixing inside of it. It allows downmixing of multi-channel audio to 2-channel audio. No need to choose it or force it. It does it. It automatically does it for you. This supports downmixing of pretty much all the Dolby signals, from Dolby Digital Plus to Dolby True HD, DTS HD, DTS, master audio, whatever it may be. All the downmixing you need for that. We have auto lip syncing adjustments for this as well to make sure that things line up appropriately, and it's backwards compatible. So if you have a job site with MoIP deployed today and this new feature sounds really great, you don't have to replace the entire system. Just buy the transmitter for the source you need to do that on. These things mix and match across the board. It's a big deal here, guys. That's kind of the idea that we're trying to bring to this, is now we have 2 transmitters, one with pretty much everything you need for 90% of your job, which is the standard one. If you need a few extra audio features, buy that version that's needed for that. It has all of the exact same features as the previous model. It just adds in the audio downmixing where it's needed. It's a big deal when we talk about that. So building upon that, 1 transmitter per source. That's how you design your systems. The next MoIP component is your receiver. Same piece of design. 1 receiver per TV. That's how you design your systems. Similar concept. Receiver is about 25% smaller than our transmitters. 4K HDR support on our receivers. Obviously PoE. We have all of the same IR control features, bidirectional IR. We have virtual RS-232 on these devices. The biggest feature though on our receivers, the most important feature on our receivers, this is all about making this stuff easier for you guys to install, is all of our receivers also support HDMI downscaling. So the ability for you to mix and match your 1080p and your 4K displays across the entire job site, and you don't have to worry about dumbing your system down so that that one TV can work with everything else. The days of the old matrix switchers when you call in tech support and they say, hey man, you got to set it to the lowest common denominator for your resolution, those are all done. Every receiver can be set individually for the resolution that that TV supports. This ensures you can go to your legacy job sites and retrofit appropriately on every single job. That's a huge deal. This makes your life so much easier. I'll show you how easy it is in just a second when we jump into the UI here. But the receivers are great. Again, about 25% smaller, same concept. We have a new receiver that also supports audio downmixing. The exact same idea as a transmitter, has all the same feature sets as a standard unit. It just adds in that extra output for audio downmixing at all the different levels that we have available. Pass-through wise, you're going to pass through all the audio you need to your sources, from your sources to your TVs, to your soundbars, whatever it may be. It's when you want to extract that audio that you buy the upgraded version to allow for that. So that was a lot of feature sets that are out there, guys. We have great resources to help you break down what features you may or may not need on our websites. But the point here is we talked about one controller, two transmitters, two receivers. Those are 5 MoIP components, just 5. That should work on almost every single one of your job sites. That's how we're trying to make this easier. You shouldn't have to struggle to figure things out and know which ones you want to go where and whatnot. So as you continue to build on this idea of our MoIP systems, obviously the initial idea is adding or creating different distributed media across the entire home. One of the really cool features we also talk about as an addition with MoIP is the ability to take all of our receivers and combine them to create unique video walls as well. So all of our receivers have native video wall deployment built into them as well. 2x2, 3x3, and 4x4 video walls. So up to a 16 TV video wall you can add into your systems. So really, really cool options there to continue to grow these things across the board. And I'll demonstrate just a second what that looks like as well. So I saw a great question that came through from Jason. What's the use case for down converting the new at the receiver end of the system? So there aren't as many as there are at the transmitter end. Some of those examples may be you have a sound bar at the receiver end and your TV doesn't have the proper audio output to inject audio into that sound bar. Maybe at the receiver end you have one of our mini amps and you need to extract audio to go into the mini amp. Maybe at the receiver end, you have a small 2-channel audio deployment and you need to extract audio to go into that small 2-channel audio deployment. It's really if you have a use case where there is an audio endpoint in the room that you can't get the audio out of the TV. That's the best use case. But most TVs today support that, but there are plenty that still don't. And so that's where you would need to have that extraction at the TV end, at the receiver end of the MoIP side of things. Great question there, Jason. Thanks. So let's jump in and let's talk a little bit about the actual kind of installation of the MoIP system. The very first thing you have to do on any single MoIP job, and we're going to go through this in a second, is set up your network switch. I repeat, the very first thing you have to do on every single job is set up your network switch. If you do not set up your network switch before plugging anything in, you will crash your network. This isn't an if, this isn't a maybe. You will crash your network if you do not set up your network switch before plugging MoIP in. There's a reason we have a nice thick card when you open up every single MoIP box that says, hey, you do this first. It's because you have to set up your switch first. We'll go through that more in a second. Once you set up your switch, you can plug in your controller, you can plug in your transmitters and your receivers to the system, and you can continue with the MoIP piece of the setup. I want to go in and kind of break down those pieces for you guys. Also, just to note, if you wanted to set this system up before you go to a job site, you don't have to have the actual sources and displays plugged into your transmitters and receivers for it to work and set up. You can stack all of your transmitters and receivers up, plug into your network switch in your shop, and you can get the entire system kind of prepped and ready to go, and then put all that in a box, give it to a tech, tell them to go to the job site and plug it in just like this, and then the system will be set up and ready to go, and you can start plugging in your sources and TVs if you want to. You don't have to have your sources and your displays plugged in to set up a system. Just a note for you guys if you're going into a job early or if you're setting it up in your actual offices or shops. So let's talk about the network piece of MoIP. It's important to understand what's happening with MoIP from a technical standpoint, so that you guys know what's going on in the background, so that if you have issues, you can troubleshoot, but also it really leads into the setup piece of the MoIP system as well. So in MoIP, we are using a type of network communication traffic management called multicast. In networking, you have 3 main types of, you could say, traffic movement in a sense. Unicast, broadcast, and multicast. They are different ways of transmitting messages throughout your network. A message, it's a packet, it's communication. Every time you send an email, you send a picture to someone, you listen to music, you watch something on YouTube, whatever it may be, you are transmitting a message using these types of message types: unicast, broadcast, or multicast. Unicast is the most common type of network message. It is a one-to-one communication. One IP address talking directly to another IP address. It's the most common. It's not very traffic intensive. It's pretty simple, but it's not as quick and as fast as some of the other ones that are out there. The next type of network message is broadcast. It's the second most common. Broadcast occurs very often. Broadcast is one device broadcasting its network message to every single device on the network. It's broadcasting it to everybody out there. It's saying, hey, I'm saying this. Everyone is going to have to listen. Everyone is going to have to analyze and find out what that message is, and the devices that don't need that message will shed it, and the devices that do need the message will accept it in, but everyone still has to see it. And then you have multicast. Multicast is what we're using with MoIP. Multicast is a one-to-many. It is one device sending its message to a specific group of devices. It's only sending that message to the group of devices that needs it. It's not broadcasting it anymore. It's just sending it to those that need it. This ensures that all those devices that were getting that broadcast message don't have to worry about it anymore. It makes your network much more efficient in how it gets deployed. Multicast is a very important use case in our industry. MoIP isn't the only device that uses multicast. A lot of devices on your job sites use it. The key with multicast, though, is you have to have a device in line that can manage that multicast. That's your layer 2 managed switch. A managed switch is required to manage multicast. If you don't have a managed switch in play and your system is trying to use multicast, it will recognize, I don't see a multicast kind of controller in a sense, and I'm just going to have to broadcast it now. Well, that's no good, because now we're going to be broadcasting this high volume network traffic in MoIP to everything on our job sites, and that's going to be bad. So it's a big deal to understand the background. Let's talk about the configuration of this and what that might look like, because it's really easy to do with Arachnus at the end of the day. So let me hop in here to my system, and we'll kind of talk through that. So I'm going to log in to one of my Arachnus switches here. You'll see I have OvrC up. I'm going to log in to my 210 switch here, and we're going to take a look at setting up multicast. So you log into your Arachnus switch. I have a look at it here. I think I have the password right. So you log into your switch for the first time. I'm going to zoom in a little bit for you guys so you can see a little bit better. The setup of your network switch once you log in is you go to the advanced section of your network switch. You select the multicast option here on the left-hand side, and you select IGMP snooping. IGMP snooping is a network feature we're using to manage multicast. It's very common. It occurs on many different network solutions out there. It's nothing unique. It's just what you're doing to set it up. This switch is already set up for snooping because my network is already running MoIP. I don't want to turn it off because I don't want to crash my network. So if you were to go into a brand new switch, you would log in, follow those navigation steps. The first thing you're going to see here under status is it is disabled. You need to enable snooping. You'll see these options here for version and report suppression. Leave those alone, nothing you have to change. And you'll see unregistered IPMC forward action. So we have some notes in our documentation that we talk some more about this. There are two options, flood and drop. On your MoIP switch, your dedicated MoIP switch, you want that to be set to drop. Because if you have a dedicated MoIP switch, what this feature is saying is that if some other multicast traffic comes on the switch and we don't know what it is, we can either decide to flood it, broadcast it to everybody, or we can say, hey, you know what? I don't know what that is. I don't want it. Let's drop it. Let's not worry about that. I don't want it to interfere with anything else. If you're on a dedicated MoIP switch, you shouldn't have to worry about outside multicast traffic, so we can set it to drop. Typically speaking, if you're deploying multicast on other devices within your network unless you specifically know what you need, you should set it to flood. This is not my dedicated MoIP switch, so I have it set to flood on this switch as the example. For you guys doing the dedicated deployments, set it to drop. The next section here, if you have multiple VLANs, you could enable multicast on specific VLANs. We only have one, so we're enabling snooping status, we're enabling fast leave. Two important settings there. And then you have your courier settings. So the courier needs to be enabled on your MoIP switch. The courier is essentially what's telling this switch to send out a beacon every 125 seconds looking for new instances of multicast traffic. If you don't have your courier turned on, it will not look for multicast traffic and it will not work. It will only look for multicast traffic when we press apply if it's disabled. While enabled, it will basically send out a beacon every 125 seconds to find new instances of traffic. It is very important you have the courier turned on. Then you click apply. That's it. So recap: enabled, drop, enable, 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 apply. That's 5 settings, guys. That's quick and easy. That's simple. Enable, drop, enable, 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 apply. Done. Finito. Network is ready to roll. I told you guys, we want to make this thing freaking easy. Less hardware to choose from. Setup is super simple. So we have our network switch set up. We are done with the network portion of our system. When we want to come down the road later and add more transmitters, more receivers to our system, we don't have to reset up our network switch. We just plug it into the switch and go. So network setup is done. Let's hop into our MoIP controllers and take a look. Obviously, the easiest way to get into your controller is going through and using OvrC to grab it if you want to. You don't have to use OvrC. You can navigate to the local IP of your controllers. Whatever is easiest for you guys. Obviously, OvrC makes your life easier. It auto-discovers for you. So you guys come into your MoIP controllers for the very first time. You won't see a scene just like this. It's going to be blank, and it's going to say, press discover to find your transmitters and receivers. So all you have to do to actually add all of those transmitters and receivers to your system is press discover. We are going to search your network and find every instance of our transmitters and receivers and automatically add them to your system. None of this taking pictures of every single MAC address and service tag and trying to type them in manually. No manually adding of devices. You plug your system in, you set up your network switch, plug in your transmitters, plug in your receivers, press discover. They will be added to your system. A year down the road, when that client buys that new TV and tells you to come out there and upgrade their system because they didn't really think to ask you before they bought the TV, simple as that. Just press discover to add that new device to your system. So once added, technically speaking, your system is running. You're going to get video. You can start switching your inputs and outputs. You can start rolling. It's as simple as that. So real quick here, I have a question from Carl. If you're running MoIP on the core switch and we set up a VLAN just to segment the MoIP, is that better than not setting up a VLAN? So what I will say to that, Carl, is if you are 100% comfortable using VLANs and opening up your VLAN so that your control system can talk across that VLAN and whatnot, go ahead and do it. Will it make a major difference within your system? Maybe, maybe not. It really depends on if there was an issue prior to the VLAN being there. We've seen some scenarios where there is heavy network latency already on the system, and then you add MoIP. Potentially a VLAN can improve the setup at that point. But if there wasn't latency before, you probably won't see much of a difference. So it's one of those things where if you're very comfortable doing it, go ahead, use VLANs, put MoIP on that VLAN, but make sure that you're exposing inner VLAN routing appropriately so your control systems can communicate with your controller and vice versa within. So great question. VLANs are not required. I discourage them if you're not comfortable with them. The whole point of MoIP is you don't have to use VLANs if you don't want to. It works completely fine without them. So kind of back to our setup there. We discovered our devices. All of our transmitters, all of our receivers are in our system now. The first thing you're going to see is our transmitters are right here in front of you. and you get a live preview of what's going on inside of those transmitters. This is a powerful feature, guys. I'm getting a status of what's going on. Is it streaming or not? I'm getting my firmware version, all my transmitters, MAC address information. I'm getting the video details. It's pulling from the actual source itself. But this live preview here, this is freaking awesome. This is a test monitor. You guys, if you've ever worked with tech support and they're trying to troubleshoot EDID issues, you've probably heard tech support ask, hey man, you have a test monitor that you can go and plug into that source, plug into that matrix? No. Can you get like a TV or something? So you're trying to drag a TV into the AV closet to plug into your matrix switch or to your source to figure these things out? That's not fun. This is your new test monitor. This is telling you if you have a handshake between that source and the input of your transmitter. That's a big deal. That's troubleshooting 101. We've done it for you. You can see right away if you have sync. If you don't have sync, you need to troubleshoot between your source and between your transmitter. If you do have sync, move down the line. Go to your next piece, process of elimination. If you were working with our new version, I don't have any of the new versions deployed in my home. This is my demo system at home. You would have extra settings here for audio, downmixing, and lip sync adjustments if those were there. On the basic version, all you have is the ability to force the audio EDID, but nothing else in terms of specific configuration over audio. Those are your transmitters. Super simple there to make your changes. The live preview also makes it easier to rename those across the board. And then you have your receivers. Again, your receivers are behind every single TV. It's very important you know which receiver is where. When you first deploy your MoIP system, everything is going to be named TX or RX dash the MAC address of that device. So when you're trying to go into a room and figure out, oh crap, what receiver is behind this TV? I know for a fact when you put that receiver behind the TV, you didn't write down what that MAC address is. As you guys are trying to look at my blurry picture, you didn't write down what MAC address was on that receiver. So you're trying to get behind the TV, take a picture of it, see what's going on so you can find out which one it is. We have a great feature here called Identify Mode. You're not going to see it because I don't have a TV to show you what it looks like live, but that Identify Mode is going to pop up green text on every single display. And it's going to tell you what the current receiver is in that room. And it's going to tell you what the current MAC address is of the receiver behind that TV you're currently looking at. So now you can walk into that room and see, oh, D46A91210639, that's my bonus room. I know where I'm at now. Let me go ahead and open up the settings and rename that to bonus room. Again, we're making your life easier. So once you rename things, then you have the ability, like I said before, to force the resolution on these receivers to match the TVs you have in that room. So the TV I have behind me in this room right now, that is an LG Plasma. I am not getting rid of my LG Plasma, right? Plasma was a beautiful thing, and the industry killed it. The end users killed it, right? You know, people. I love my Plasma. I don't want to get rid of it. It's 1080p though. My 4K Apple TV, it doesn't like it. So with MoIP, I have dumbed it down to full HD 1080p 60. I have also forced the HDCP down as well so that it works appropriately so that my system runs the right way within this ecosystem. If I set it to pass through and I have my Apple TV selected, it would try and send 4K 60 from the Apple TV, and it's not going to work. So I dumb that thing down. I scale it down at the receiver. And then you do have the ability within MoIP to even rotate the image on those TVs. The best example there is either video walls or digital signage, right? If you want to rotate a TV physically, you can tell MoIP to rotate the image with you as well. So great feature sets here across the board from the receiver side of things. The last piece we care about here from this main setup screen is if you do want to deploy video walls. I don't have enough TVs to show you guys what this might look like. But if you wanted to add a video wall to your system, it's so simple. It really is. Give that video wall a name, right? We're going to call it the bar video wall. You select the size, 2x2, 3x3, 4x4, And because we made it super simple for you to name everything, all you have to do is tell it what receiver goes where. Top left, top right, bottom left, bottom right. If you have some TVs with thick bezels, you can measure those bezels and then put that information in here, and we will make sure we don't cut off the content when we build that video wall. Once you do all the setup, you set it all up in your system, and you click save, all it does is it creates a virtual receiver down here below. Think of that virtual receiver as a new output on your matrix, right? I say input 2 to output 5, that's my virtual video wall. All that's telling the controller is to create the video wall. Now that I've called that input to that output, it builds my video wall, and I have my beautiful video wall sitting there. It's so simple to do, guys. It's so easy to deploy. So that's your main setup of MoIP, guys, is really set up your switch, plug in your devices, discover them, name them, fix your EDIDs if you need to, and you're ready to roll. Moving into your control system, maybe the next spot inside of the setup there. We do have some advanced feature settings if you want to adjust things from a global level. Our transmitter and receiver pairing allows you guys to reorganize where your transmitters and receivers sit at an input level. If you don't like the order they discover in, you can change that. You can change the names globally. You can force things as well for testing purposes across the board here. They're just some advanced settings if you need them. We have the ability to set up IR routing within our system. So this is if you want to make sure your control system only sends IR to a specific transmitter, and that transmitter can only send its IR to a specific group of receivers. Maybe you have a handful of Sony TVs that you want to make sure only get Sony codes. You can do that. We also have IR over IP. We have the ability to send IR commands into our system via IP. That's a big deal. If you use Control 4, this is extremely simple to deploy. It's all built into the driver. Same concept as our serial RS-232 over IP as well. Tons of really powerful features there. The one I want to spend a little bit of time here on, though, is that what if your clients don't want a control system? What if you're going into a bar type scenario, right? They got a lot of TVs. They don't want to spend the money on a control system. It's very possible. We have our really cool end user client control app. It's not really an app. It's accessed via a web IP address. You can put that behind a dynamic DNS address if you want to, but it's accessed via a web IP address. It's really simple to deploy. It's turned on by default. If you click View App on your computer, it's going to take you into this new web page, and you are going to see your 2 available outputs that I have on my example here. If you have multiple TVs, it's going to have multiple TVs. It's going to tell you what room it is. It's going to tell you what the current source is associated with it. And then it will try and send a CEC command to power on that display and power off that display as well. Just a note that that is there if you need it. If you select any of those outputs, it's going to show you all of the available inputs to select from. If one of those inputs is a video wall, that's going to be available down here as well. One of the really cool things this also gives you is the ability to create scenes. Think of these scenes. I love the bar type example as one of the ones you would use here. A scene is maybe this is here in North Carolina. We're a Carolina Panthers place. Maybe this bar is the Carolina Panthers headquarters, and the Panthers game's coming up at 1 p.m. on Sunday. I want to make sure that when it's time for the game, I can flip every TV in the entire place to the Panthers game. I know that my first cable box in that rack is always tuned to the channel for the Panthers. Doesn't matter. It's always tuned to that channel. So I create a scene called Panthers, or I create a scene called Game Day. That Game Day scene, the way that it works is that you preset up every receiver to be to the proper source. So if I know that Cable box 1 is always tuned to channel 11 that's always showing my Panthers game at 1 p.m. on Sundays. I pre-set up the system. I go in here and I click Add Scene. And once I hit OK, that scene is saved. And I have it there ready to go. Now, whenever I go and recall that scene, it's going to recall that scene the way I just set it up. So I can quickly put those right TVs to where they need to go really fast. There's some of the way a control system might do things for you. Scenes are a great way to grow and expand upon kind of automation without having an actual control system. So James asked a great question. For video wall deployment, do you have to have a receiver behind each TV? Yes, you do. So there's two different types of video type walls people see. Is you have our video wall, which are, say, for a 2x2 video wall, you have 4 specific TVs, right? 1 TV, 2 TV, 3 TV, 4 TV. Each TV requires a receiver behind that. We don't have like a kind of all built in one kind of processor or whatnot. And then you have video tiling, which is putting individual sources on one TV or one big projector. So with our solution, it is a receiver behind each TV to create that video wall experience. But what I wanted to show you guys with this end user app is if you are deploying your MoIP solution, this doesn't have to be configured via an actual web interface as well. So an iPad as an example here, right? I have my iPad that my client has. Once you create or you go into the actual MoIP interface from your actual browsers, there's actually the ability for you guys in Safari to save, if you click share, to add this website to your home screen within Safari on an iPad. So when you add that to your home screen in Safari, you'll see there's a binary MoIP icon sitting right there on the home screen right away. You click that binary MoIP icon, it's going to open up your end user, your control app right there on the iPad as if you were using a control system. Big deal, guys. It makes your life super easy to be able to deploy this type of scenario there. I love our end user control app. Control system makes MoIP really easy to use. But if you know you can't use a control system, client doesn't want to pay for it, no need. We have our end user app here available right across the board as well. So the point here, guys, is MoIP is super easy to deploy. We have a ton of really great hardware, not a ton. We have 5 MoIP devices, right? 1 controller, 2 different transmitters, 2 different receivers. Only difference there is audio downmixing. The network deployment is extremely simple. And then the last piece, right, is all of this MoIP deployment is all available in OvrC. So you go into your MoIP controller within OvrC today, you see basic information, basic configuration, but you use our Web Connect option, and it takes you directly into this MoIP UI to go in and do all of your setup and control. Super easy to sell and design for, extremely easy to install, and you have OvrC on top to back it all up and control it. MoIP is a really, really powerful system to give you guys a lot of flexibility, a lot of control across the board. So I see a couple of questions that have already come through here. I'm going to kind of touch on some of those, and then I've got a couple of other things here at the end as well that I want to talk about. So I see one question that came in. Is there a fiber transmitter and receiver in the works? So potentially down the road, the biggest thing there, guys, when we talk about a fiber integration with MoIP is, one, it would require a fiber network switch as well to go with your fiber transmitters and receivers, again, because you're all running that back to a network switch, or you would have to have a bunch of media converters across the board, and you start to really expand upon the cost of a MoIP system. A dedicated fiber switch is extremely expensive. Putting in those fiber modulators inside of our transmitters and receivers is also extremely expensive. So we do our best to keep these things really competitive from a price point standpoint. I'll talk about some other fiber things we have out there today. But from a MoIP side of things, their biggest reason for adding fiber is less compression to go into those 10 gig type solutions out there. We're working towards that. but our goal always is to make this cross-functional for all of you guys, and we want to be cognizant of pricing that's out there. And then Carl, I saw you asked a little bit more of a more in-depth question. I'll kind of come back to that in a second. It's a little bit more in-depth as well. You guys, as you're talking through, as I'm talking through this next piece here, feel free to post some more questions. The last thing I really wanted to cover here today, outside of MoIP, is we also have an ever-expanding line of traditional HDMI products that are out there as well that we've really developed specifically for our local channel. A lot of you guys may not have seen these. We have everything from low-cost 1080p traditional HDMI extenders to really great 4K 60 444 HDBaseT extenders to simple 5x1, 3x1, 4x2, 4x4 HDBaseT full 4K HDMI switchers with IP control on some of our higher end models. We have standard HDBaseT fiber extenders up to 1,000 meters. Again, these are not MoIP products; these are standard products. I want you guys to know that if you're going to jobs that don't require a MoIP, we have that available today as well. We have a great chart on our website that shows you all of the things that are available from that front as well. I'll pull that up here so you guys can kind of get a look at what that looks like. Give me 1 second. So if you look at our actual website as well, we have a full chart telling you all the extenders we have available for you guys. So a lot of flexibility there from non-MoIP products as well at really, really good price points that Gary can kind of share some more info with you guys kind of down the road as well. So I saw a couple of other MoIP questions that came through here. So I think I see Carl, what you're asking around some echo. I might have to take a little bit more, take that offline, Carl, to really understand. If you don't mind shooting me an email, I'll put my email here for you guys with that so I can understand a little bit more, Carl. I think you and I have chatted before in email. So if you don't have my email still, I'll add it in for you guys that don't have it today. But I would like to talk a little more about that. So then Kenny asks, is it best to put all the sources on your MoIP switch as well? So when you say sources, it's best to put all of your receivers on there, but if you have sources in terms of that are network controllable sources like an Apple TV that needs to be on the network or a Roku or whatever, those don't have to be on the same switch as MoIP. No, there's no need for that because they're really not interacting on the network in that sense. The control system is talking to them, but the actual MoIP system itself isn't talking over the network specifically to that source. The HDMI from that source is going into the transmitter and into the receivers, but the actual communication over the network with those sources is not. So no need to put your sources on the actual switches themselves that you kind of share with your MoIP system. But guys, we're right here up on time. I'm not seeing a ton more questions coming through. If you have them, please feel free to ask. If you want to follow with me, you see my email right there on the screen as well. I'm happy to talk in the future with some more information around this. Carl, please follow up with me with your a little bit more of an in-depth question. I want to take some time to make sure I answer it appropriately for you. And like I said, MoIP's great, guys. Try it out. That's the best thing you can do. Try deploying it. If you have challenges, feel free to call our tech support team. Feel free to shoot me an email, loop in your local teams, wherever those may be, and we'll be able to support you.